What's up, everybody? My name is Nathan Brown from Doctors of Running, and today I'm going to be walking through what my favorite shoes were for myself for 2024. If you're wanting to hear our full team's picks, we do have an audio podcast out on it. It's audio only, so you can go over to whatever platform you listen to or for podcasts and hear that full thing with the whole team talking about what shoes we loved. So we're at that time of the year. We've tested a ton of shoes. We've been able to figure out what's worked for us and what doesn't. And so I'm going to walk through my favorite picks, not what I think is best for everyone, my favorite picks for myself for what 2024 had to hold. A few things I wanted to say about my running year was, if you've been following this, you've heard this, but I had a pretty significant ligament tear in my foot last year. So 2024 has really been about re-entry, getting back in the swing of things, which meant I've been putting in a lot of base miles, not a ton of heavy workouts, no training for any specific races. I did get 2 races in this year. One was a 5-mile race. The other one was a 10K. But otherwise, it's been long runs, easy runs, some mild tempos, things like that. When I talk about my pacing for myself, usually my easy runs are somewhere between 8:30 and 9:30 minutes per mile. Usually I'm running a 10K sub 7 right now. This year it was right around 6:45 pace or a little bit lower than that. And then for same thing for about the 5-mile. If I'm looking at longer runs and a little bit of tempo, I might dip down into the low 8s or upper 7s, just to give you a little bit of context. So the first category that we're going to talk about is daily trainer. So this year, my daily trainer was not the shoe that I got the most miles in, but that's not because I wouldn't have. It's because it came later in the year. Usually the daily trainer pick is the easiest because I usually get the most amount of miles on it because that's what I use it for. But this year it came late enough where I didn't get that to happen. But what I'm looking for in a daily trainer is one that I can take out for easy runs. I want to be able to take it out for middle distance runs. I want to be able to have a little bit of versatility so that it can kind of be this workhorse. The other thing that I look for is affordability, because I want the value of a daily trainer to offer the durability and the cost to make sure that it's going to last a long time and eat up a chunk of miles. And so this year, my top pick is the 361 Elios. It was a really great shoe to test out. It came out earlier this year, but we didn't get it till later. It's got a great new foam that 361 is just bringing out this year, and it really brings it to the level of foam compounds that you're feeling in the market. It's a slightly higher stack shoe, but it still has some flexibility in the forefoot, so I like that it has my ability for me to use my mechanics a little bit while still being cushioned. I've taken this on long runs, so like an hour and a half. I've also taken it on easy recovery runs, and I've done a little bit of tempo. It's definitely on the softer end of the spectrum when it comes to shoes, which is kind of surprising for me, but when you put more into it, it seems to stiffen up in a way that makes it responsive. So I really liked this shoe. Got full reviews out on all of these if you're wanting specifics on specs. I like the fit of this shoe as well. It's got a nice amount of space in the toe box, and it's got a little bit of a stretch. It's nothing fancy through the upper, but it does the job. And I think the shoe comes in at $145, which, weirdly to say, that's on the cheaper side of the spectrum when it comes to a lot of these shoes that have a lot of foam underneath. And so it performs really well, and it's coming in on the quote unquote cheaper end of the spectrum when it's coming to daily training shoes. A shoe that was a runner-up for me as a daily trainer is one that I've loved for lots of years, and it's the Nova Blast 5. I think that the version here did a nice job amplifying a little bit of the foam, because they did change it to the Flight Foam Blast Max, which just has a little bit more resiliency to it and feels a little bit bouncier, so it added some versatility. Compared to the Elios, it's definitely firmer, but it has a similar amount of foam, so they had similar functions. Just if you're looking for something more firm, it's going to be the Nova Blast 5. Really, again, nice room in the toe box. It's been a workhorse, no wear really for me on the outsole, so another great option. The second category that I'm going to talk about is my favorite shoe for the long run. And there were 2 shoes that I would actually there was like 4 shoes I would reach for long runs, but these are the 2 I ended up reaching for most often this year as I've been coming back. And because I was coming back, I was kind of avoiding plates a little bit unless I really needed it to help my foot as I was recovering. But because I was trying to avoid plates a little bit for myself, just because of the specific nature of what I was going through, my top pick was the revamped Triumph 22. They put in the new blend of Power Run PB into this shoe, and it worked really great for me. Step and feel is super soft. Like super soft, mushy feeling, but then once you start running, it stiffens up and just gives you a little bit of responsiveness, but not a ton. It feels like a cruiser. It's got a little bit of a rockered platform, and because of how much foam is there, even though it's not plated, it has some stiffness, but not too much, which hit that sweet spot for me. It does fit a little bit long and has space, which I appreciated for long runs. But if you are someone who's kind of on the smaller end, you could consider going a half size down in the Triumph 22. But I loved the fit for what I was using it for. It's a nice cushioned, comfortable upper. It doesn't have things that make it go super fast. It's not versatile in that way. I didn't like taking this shoe for workouts, so that's why I reserved it for the long run. I thought the transitions through the heel and forward were really nice. Nice wide base through the midfoot, so even though there was some soft nature, it wasn't unstable. The other shoe, which many people have talked about over this year, is the Super Blast 2. I don't need to say too much because people have talked about it ad nauseum, but again, it had just enough flexibility for me to enjoy it for this year and what I was coming back from. This, in comparison to the Triumph, has much more versatility in terms of speed, so I did love it for long runs, but I also enjoyed the opportunity to go faster, and durability on this shoe has been fantastic, both from version 1 and version 2. So that's Super Blast 2, another shoe that I loved for long runs. Now, if we go over to the trail world, I had a couple opportunities to run some trail out in California when I was doing some continuing education, and I also had some opportunities on trails around here with our Ice Age Trail and a state park that I have just north of us here. So my pick this year is very outside of the normal realm for myself. Usually when I look for a trail shoe, because of the type of trail running I do, which is non-competitive and just loving to be outside and spending time out there, I usually look for something that can just be a hiker and then also can be a running shoe at the same time. So I want it to kind of span the gamut, so I don't have to have a specific trail running shoe and then a hiking shoe. I like to just merge them into one. However, one shoe this year, I loved the ride and the midsole compound so much that I had to pick it. And part of that's because I also have done road running with the shoe and have had no issues. So this could be one of those options for kind of road to trail. And that is the Hoka Tecton X3. They have really revamped the midsole. They put a plate that spans to the lateral side out here and the medial side, adding just a little bit of structure to this softer foam compound. But I've been hoping, and haven't seen it yet, this exact midsole appear for a pure road shoe, and it just hasn't happened yet. But I took this out. I was in a Redwood kind of regional park in Oakland, and it was a really roots driven and lots of rocks, and I had no issues with my ankles. I'm prone to ankle sprains. I have some chronic laxity there, which is fine, but I had no issues rolling my ankle in these, which is always a good sign. And just, again, there was just enough responsiveness without being too soft, which would make it more unstable. So it checked all the boxes. It is a booty construction, in which for me, it worked great. I could see where this just isn't going to fit someone's foot. I think Matt on our team said he was having issues with the fit of the booty construction, but it fit me like a glove, laced down, and was nice and secure, no issues at all, and kept a lot of the dust out just with kind of this raised amount here. And I usually wear long socks anyway, so I didn't feel any irritability from the upper through the heel. But just a great shoe. It's got the Vibram outsole, more shallow lugs. They're about 4 millimeters, but good grip and just a great overall ride. I got to take a run on this across the Golden Gate Bridge when I was out there, and that was like a 5-mile run on the road, and it felt like I was wearing a road shoe, but that's where I think it could come into the spectrum of, hey, doing some road to trail running. And again, this is just so far outside of my normal picks, but it was so fun to run in that I had to pick it, even though if I weren't getting this shoe for testing, I probably wouldn't be able to justify for myself buying this shoe. I thought it was just that fun to run in that I had to give it my nod. But more in line with what I'm typically used to doing for picking with trail shoes, this is my shoe this year that I've used for hiking with our family, and that I've also enjoyed going on my kind of easy, just spending time on my feet. And that was the Altra Experience Wild, and I just really enjoyed the fit of this shoe. Some of the Altra shoes this year have been really low volume. This one has felt for me true to what it's been, where there was enough space for my foot to breathe. It was not tight around the throat here. And then the the geometry and the design here has just a bit of a rocker. It looks much more rockered in the video than it feels like on foot. You do get a little bit of that slight propulsive feel, but when you're walking, it just feels like a normal hiker. It's not doing anything too crazy to your foot. The foam is what feels like a very traditional EVA. It doesn't have a lot of rebound or bounce, but that does mean that it feels more stable, and it's cushioned enough to spend a lot of time on my feet, and I didn't have any issues. I also really appreciated the lockdown of this shoe. There's some extra strategic padding that kind of goes just above your calcaneus or that heel bone, so it felt like it really locked it in well the whole way, and the lacing system was simple, secure, and did a really nice job. So this is I would say my more true to self pick for trail shoes, and it was really an enjoyable shoe to run and excited to see what they do next. And I've always loved hiking in the Lone Peak, but I've never been able to run in it. It just hasn't matched my mechanics, and I haven't really customized myself to a true zero drop. So having this as an option has been a fun option for this year. All right, moving over into performance trainers and workout shoes. My first one, this is actually the shoe I got the most miles in this year because of how I used it early on in the year for some of my rehab and coming back, and that is the Endorphin Speed 4. A lot of people have talked about this shoe as well, but I really couldn't get along with the first two iterations of this because of the narrow platform, a little bit of instability in the heel, and I would get some soreness around my ankle, part of my chronic ankle instability issues. But in versions 3 and 4, they widened the plate so that it is providing some stability to the midfoot, and they also added some width here in the midfoot, and that for me has done a really nice job allowing me to crank out a lot of miles. And I think that from 3 to 4, they also streamlined it a little bit more so that it can do those workouts. So anytime I was doing any sort of faster running, or if I was running with a friend who I knew runs a little bit faster than me, this is the shoe that I laced up this year. Super comfortable. You all know, if you've been around the shoe geekdom world, you've definitely heard about the Endorphin Speed because it's been kind of popularized since it first came out as kind of this kind of training companion to the racing shoe. I also like that although it's plated, and this is why it worked for me, although it's plated, you can see that there's a pretty good amount of flexibility in comparison to a shoe like the Super Blast. This actually has more flexibility, even though it's plated. So the plate for me really functions as a stabilizer laterally and just a little bit of longitudinal stiffness to let you operate off of that rocker. So Endorphin Speed 4, great shoe. Looking forward to what they continue to do in the future with this model. The other workout shoe that I appreciated this year is kind of on a different end of the spectrum. So a lot of these workout shoes are getting really high stacked. They're becoming kind of these training companions and super trainers. But this one is more of one of those that it allows you to do the work. It feels like you're connected to the ground, but it still has some responsiveness. And that is the Hoka Mach 6. So I really liked all of the iterations of the Mach coming up to now, but now they added a rubber outsole, gave it a little bit of extra grip for some of those workouts. And I think that they also dialed in the fit here. So when I first put this on, I thought it was too tight. It opened up a little bit, but it's a really snug workout-like fit. So I didn't use this for long workouts, but I did use it for shorter workouts when I wanted to be connected to the ground and kind of feel myself pushing through. So Mach 6 was the honorable mention for me. The next category is shoes that are kind of these training shoes that have a plate in them, but they aren't necessarily racing shoes. And for me, with the type of running I did this year, I didn't use these for workouts ever. They were a combination of easy runs and long runs and just kind of getting miles on. And these are my two favorites that have a plate, but are not meant for racing. And I'm excluding the Endorphin Speed from this category because I already used it. So the first one is the Puma Deviate 3. This shoe has a dual density midsole, so it's got a softer foam on top, a little bit firmer on the bottom with a plate sandwiched between. And what I think the biggest thing that I want to say about this shoe up front is that I did size up half a size, which was perfect because this upper is a little bit lower volume, but it does have some stretch. So having that little extra length and width allowed me to fit really well. So I'm usually size 9. This is size 9.5. I ran a kind of an hour and a half long run around a lake that we go to up north, and it was perfect for the rolling hills. It's got that combination of flexibility and rigidity with the plate because it's not too stiff, and the dual density midsole also provided some stability and also gave a little bit of responsiveness. So just a super comfortable shoe. I would call it a cruiser. It worked really well when I was dipping down into like half marathon pace or efforts. That was where this was a really fun shoe to run in. The other one that it's basically the same. I technically am picking the Deviate 3, but I use this other shoe for very similar purposes. And it's the New Balance SC Trainer V3. This one's feels a little bit higher stacked, where I felt a little bit connected to the ground in the Deviate. This one feels like you're floating a little bit more. And I also did a half size up for this shoe, which worked really good for volume for myself as well. I would be curious. I haven't done my true to size in this one. I think I could get away with it, but in a lot of New Balance shoes, I've been having to size up, and that's why I went that route here. And I had no issues at all with lockdown. I felt like I was able to get security in the heel and the midfoot. And this, again, just feels like a shoe that I could get into rhythm with. I was not cranking workouts in this, but I was doing longer runs, and it just felt really comfortable when I didn't want to have to feel like I was too connected to the ground. And the final category, talking about racing shoes, and these are the two shoes that I used for my races this year. And my top pick is the Asics Metaspeed Edge Paris. The Edge Paris has the rocker that starts a little bit earlier and is a little bit more gradual. And when I was testing the Edge Paris and the Sky Paris next to each other, it was a no-brainer that when I put this on, it just felt right. I felt like I had to work in the Sky Paris and the Edge Paris. It felt like it was moving me forward, and it was really propulsive, especially when I was getting up to pace, which again was kind of that sub-7 category for me. So Edge Paris, super lightweight, doesn't waste any of its design. I think it's very akin to what I liked about the Vaporfly 3, where I just felt like everything was moving forward, and that there wasn't extra weight anywhere. It was really balanced front to back. So this new foam brings it to another level of performance. It's super light, really responsive. It's on the firmer end of these the foams, and I appreciate that because the midfoot here is a little bit more narrow. So the slightly firmer midsole compound, it's still responsive, still bouncy, but slightly firmer, is really perfect for the design and how it matches with what I do. So this is what I raced my 5-mile race in. I would do it over and over again. I would have no problem taking this up to the half marathon distance once I got into shape. I might even take it for marathon, but I haven't thought about marathon in a couple years. So we'll see if I get back to that point. But for this year, loved this shoe and would choose it again for these shorter distance races that I did this year. The honorable mention for me was what I did my 10K in. And what I have to say about this shoe is the foam and the geometry is awesome. There's just one part that kind of takes it down a notch for my own mechanics. But it's the On Cloudboom Strike. Super fun shoe. Like when it comes to what the responsiveness from this foam feels like, the design with the insert having a little bit thicker foam in the forefoot, you can really feel the foam doing the propulsive nature. You don't get the propulsion from the rocker really itself. It's really coming from the foam, and it's really fun to run in. I actually went to do my 10K in this shoe and was planning to run just trying to keep it easier at 7:15s and just controlled. Got through the first mile at 6:30 and I was like, gosh, well, I guess I can't give up now. So I tried to stick around there and I ended up finishing, I think, average 6:38 to 6:44 pace, somewhere in there. And part of that was actually on a cross-country course, and so that was a grassy trail that we were on for about a mile of the 10K, and I had no issues on there either when I was up to pace. So here's the caveat for me, is that if you can look at the midfoot here, you can see that there's a little bit of a divot where they have this heel connection to where the midfoot's at. That creates a little bit of a gap when you're transitioning through, and when I was not at full effort, which when I was on the grass and stuff, and even when I was getting tired and I couldn't keep kind of really pushing off my forefoot and I was getting a little bit lazy, I noticed it was really wobbly. I just had a lot less stability through the midfoot and the heel because the foam is so responsive that when I wasn't really compressing it, it was trying to bounce back at me really quick is what it felt like. Plus with the decreased contact here, I could just feel that the amount of stability wasn't quite matching what I felt comfortable in and enjoyed. So again, really fun shoe. Other members of our team liked this shoe a lot, thought it performed really well. It just had a little bit of a lack of stability there. So there's my picks of my favorite shoes for 2024. Excited for what 2025 has to offer, and curious to hear if there are any on here that you also got along with, or if there are ones that you think I missed or that you think I would like based on what my preferences are. Thanks, everyone.